Austin was an artist who lived trapped in a cage that no one else could see. Every morning, he would wake up full of ideas. His mind was a creative whirlwind, filled with images of paintings, sculptures, and installations that could revolutionize the local art scene. He imagined himself exhibiting in important galleries, receiving praise from renowned critics, inspiring other artists. But then, his eyes would catch the phone beside his bed. Just 5 minutes, he would murmur, unlocking the screen. 5 minutes would turn into 30, which transformed into an hour. By the time he finally got up, he already felt guilty, tired before the day had even begun. His studio in the corner of the living room, an easel, a few blank canvases, and carefully organized paints, remained practically untouched for months. It wasn't for lack of time. It was something deeper. "Tomorrow I'll start my new project," he would promise himself every night. Tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow never came. In the small town of Asheville, North Carolina, everyone knew Austin as that talented artist who never produces anything. His elderly parents had always believed in his potential. His mother had passed away 2 years ago, still dreaming of seeing her son shine. His father, Samuel, a retired physics professor, observed his son's internal struggle with silent concern. The guilt of not living up to expectations, especially his own, weighed on Austin like an invisible anchor. The heavier this anchor became, the harder it was to move. One Sunday afternoon, Austin visited his father for their weekly lunch. While they ate, Samuel asked about his artistic projects. "I'm planning a new series," Austin lied, moving the food around on his plate without much appetite. "I'm just waiting for the right inspiration." Samuel observed his son for a moment, his eyes tired but perceptive. "Let's take a walk after lunch," he suggested. They walked to Samuel's old laboratory at Blue Ridge Community College, where he had taught for 40 years. The place was empty on Sundays, and the old professor still had the keys. In the dusty laboratory, Samuel turned on the lights and went to a cabinet. He returned with a Bunsen burner, a metal stand, and a small candle. "When you were a child, I taught you about thermal conduction with this experiment," said his father, preparing the equipment. "But I think I didn't teach you the most important lesson." Samuel lit the candle and held up the small yellow flame. "Bring your finger close to the flame," he instructed, "not to burn yourself, just to feel the heat." Reluctantly, Austin brought his index finger closer. When he felt the intense heat, he instinctively pulled back. "It's uncomfortable, isn't it?" Samuel asked. "Of course," Austin replied, confused. "It's a natural reaction to move away from what causes pain." Samuel smiled gently. "Yes, it's natural. Our bodies are programmed to avoid discomfort. But there's a paradox in this." The professor took a metal rod and, holding it by one end, brought the other end close to the flame. "This metal conducts heat. If I kept my fingers here long enough, I would eventually feel pain and have to let go. But if I endure momentarily..." After a few seconds, Samuel removed the rod and showed that the tip was slightly glowing. "Transformation only happens after enduring discomfort," he explained. "Austin, you don't suffer from laziness. You fear the discomfort of the creative process, the frustration of not being able to translate onto canvas what's in your mind, the fear of not being good enough, the uncertainty of the outcome, and so you escape to your comfort zone, your phone, TV shows, postponement." Austin felt something trembling inside him, a truth being exposed. Each time you think about starting to paint and then give up, it's like bringing your finger close to the flame and pulling back. You never reach transformation because you can't bear the initial heat. On the way back home, Austin remained silent. His father's words swirled in his mind like leaves in a whirlwind. Arriving at his apartment in the Asheville Mountains, he stood in front of the abandoned easel. The blank canvases seemed to accuse him. He felt a familiar tightness in his stomach, that anxiety that always preceded his escape to distractions. "It's just discomfort," he murmured to himself, repeating his father's words. "It's not a sign to stop. It's part of the process." With trembling hands, he picked up a brush. Instead of planning a masterpiece, he decided to just make strokes. Anything to start. The first few minutes were torturous. Each brushstroke seemed wrong. Frustration grew. The urge to check social media was almost unbearable. 5 minutes, he promised himself. Just 5 minutes of discomfort. When the 5 minutes passed, he promised 5 more, and then 10 more. At some point, something strange happened. The discomfort didn't completely disappear, but it changed in nature. It became a different type of energy. Less paralyzing, more propelling. Austin lost track of time. When he finally stepped away from the canvas, he realized it was dark outside. He had worked for hours. The result wasn't perfect, far from it. But there was something on the canvas that didn't exist before. A beginning. The next morning when the alarm rang, the impulse to hit the snooze button was almost automatic. But before his finger touched the phone, he remembered the flame. Discomfort is the price of transformation, he murmured, forcing himself to get out of bed. He established a simple rule. Before any distraction, he would dedicate at least 15 minutes to his artwork. Just 15 minutes of discomfort per day. In the first few days, those 15 minutes were a struggle. His mind screamed for escape. His body felt heavy. But he persisted. Gradually, the 15 minutes extended to 30, then to an hour. Some days were better than others. There were mornings when the old habit won and guilt consumed him. But now, instead of giving up completely, he came back the next day. Austin began to realize that the real enemy had never been laziness, but rather his relationship with discomfort. Each time he faced internal resistance and continued anyway, a small victory was won. 6 weeks later, his father visited him. When Samuel saw the canvases in the studio, some finished, others in progress, some abandoned, his eyes filled with tears. "You're walking through the fire," said the old professor, proud. 4 months later, Austin organized a small exhibition at a local cafe in the River Arts District. It wasn't the art gallery of his dreams, but it was a real beginning. On the cafe walls hung 10 works, the result of months facing daily discomfort. They weren't perfect. Some he still considered mediocre. But they were there, existing in the world instead of just in his mind. On opening night, his father arrived leaning on a cane. He looked more fragile, but his eyes shone with pride. Several locals attended, curious to see the work of the artist who finally produced something. An art critic from Charlotte also appeared. After carefully observing each piece, she approached Austin. "There's something interesting happening here," she said. A tension between control and abandonment, as if each work documented an internal struggle. Austin smiled. That's exactly it. By the end of the night, 3 works had small red stickers indicating they had been sold. It wasn't a fortune, but for Austin, it meant something much more valuable than money: validation. More important, however, was the internal validation, the knowledge that he had faced discomfort and emerged on the other side. A year later, Austin was working in his studio, now a space of his own that he had rented with money from growing sales, when he received a call. His father had been hospitalized. In the days that followed, sitting beside the hospital bed, Austin reflected on the transformation in his life. He hadn't completely cured his tendency to procrastinate. The fear of discomfort still appeared regularly. The difference was that now he recognized it for what it was and knew how to move through it. On a quiet afternoon while Samuel slept, Austin drew his father's profile in his sketchbook. When the elderly man woke up and saw the drawing, he smiled weakly. "You kept your hand in the flame," he whispered. 2 weeks later, Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep. At the farewell ceremony, Austin displayed a portrait he had painted of his father, the physics professor with a Bunsen burner in one hand and a small flame in the other. In the months that followed the loss, work became a refuge for Austin. The emotional discomfort of grief merged with creative discomfort, resulting in his most powerful work yet. For the exhibition of these new works at the Asheville Art Museum, Austin chose a simple title: Through the Fire. On the main wall, he placed a quote: "What we call laziness is often fear of the discomfort necessary for transformation. The only solution is to walk through the flame, no matter how small our steps. Visitors to the exhibition often asked if the phrase was from some famous philosopher. Austin would just smile and say, "From a professor I knew." When young artists approached him asking for advice, Austin didn't talk about techniques or contacts in the art world. Instead, he would light a candle and tell the story his father had taught him. "The flame is not your enemy," he would say. "It is your most honest teacher." And so, the lesson of the old physics professor continued to spread, illuminating the path for those trapped in their own invisible cages of tomorrow. Moral: what we call laziness is often the fear of discomfort. Transformation only occurs when we learn to endure this discomfort and move through it with small, consistent steps.